So I'd just like to welcome the panel up to the stage. Make yourself comfortable, please. I'm going to get them all to do a proper introduction of themselves in a moment when we get into it, but I will just run through so you know which one's which. We've got Richard over on the side over there from Transpower, Saba from Microsoft, Rebecca from Watercare, and Myles from Auckland Transport. Thank you. Sorry. So this session, we've got about 40 minutes to have a bit of a chat. I've got this cool app thing here, very digital. If you want to join into the chat, you just type something on your cool little device. It'll pop up in front of me. Once someone's checked that you're not being rude to me first, it'll get cleaned up, and then I'll be able to ask on your behalf. Old school, if you want to go old school, just stand up, wave your hand, and start yelling out, because I'm quite into that as well. Given that we've got a small group here, I'll leave that on so I can see if anyone gets interested. Quickly just do a quick introduction of myself. Graeme Muller from NZTech. NZTech is an NGO, basically. It's an aggregation of 20 technology associations now, which is funded by memberships and has a purpose to try and create a more prosperous New Zealand underpinned by technology. These associations range from sector-based ones like FinTech and EdTech and Health Tech, specialties, there's AI Forum, IoT Alliance, and then groups of people like tech women and tech marketers and the like. Collectively, we have over 1,500 members paying my salary, and the 38 other staff that we have, and we work collectively to try and create a more prosperous New Zealand, which by aggregating up the tech conversation, bringing all those communities together, helping raise the awareness of the importance of technology in New Zealand, working closely with the government across a range of things, and helping our tech exporters overseas. The conversation today is about leveraging the digital advantage. So I'm going to jabber on for a little bit, so just sit back and get comfy. Just to set the scene, obviously we all know about COVID. From our perspective, from the digital and the tech perspective, it's become a real tipping point. Digital transformation has dramatically increased. It's been something that a lot of people have talked about, but through necessity, many companies found themselves having to rapidly digitally transform, and then with government and investment in space as well, it's just kept the momentum going. New Zealand actually has a very strong pedigree in technology. For those of you who don't know, we have a strong technology sector, and very strong digital capabilities. There's roughly 100,000 IT workers or employees in New Zealand who are digital technology workers, software programmers, architects, business analysts and the like. So that's, I think, somewhere around about 5% of the workforce now is a digital technology worker. And the tech sector itself, prior to COVID, it'll be interesting to see what impact COVID has, but prior to COVID was the third largest export contributor as a major sector. Potentially it could be the second largest. It's growing at a really strong rate, and not just from an export perspective, but a lot of overseas sales, which doesn't get picked up. So we've got this pedigree, we've got the strength underneath us. And we need to, I guess, leverage that. So I'm coming from the outside in, from the infrastructure conversation. And we need to think about what are those strengths that we have in infrastructure across New Zealand, what are the strengths we have as a country, and then how do we leverage them? There is some work with the government around a digital technology industry transformation plan as part of economic policy to try and accelerate the growth and opportunity from the digital tech sector. And from that work, we've found that there's areas where the sector can grow, but fundamentally underneath that, there are some critical foundations that have to be in place. And I put it to you today, which is what we're going to discuss, that they're the same foundations you need in place to digitally transform infrastructure and the areas you're in. And those areas are getting the right skills, having your data structures right, cybersecurity, getting the security and the trust and the privacy all around that, and getting the right capital and investment. And without those things, it's very hard to grow the tech sector, and it'll be very hard to transform infrastructure as well. With that, let's engage our panels. I thought what we'd do is kick off and get each of the panellists, and we'll work along the panel, just to do a brief introduction of themselves, a bit about their role, and then sort of bring it into the conversation around, from their experience, where do they think we could be leveraging the data? We're going to focus primarily on the data today as the main leverage point. Where can we be leveraging the data to get that better advantage? Myles.
Kia ora, everybody. Is that on?
Yep.
My name is Myles Lind. I'm originally from Murihiku. For those of you who don't know that, that means Southland. So I'm one of those. I currently live in Tamaki Makaurau, and I work at Auckland Transport. I'm also the president of IPWEA New Zealand, which is a not-for-profit sector training company, and I'm also the chair of National Asset Management Canada, which is kind of similar to the New Zealand model in a way, where the federal government looked at municipalities and how they were doing asset management and using data and said we can do this better, and the federal government in Canada decided that they would fund that 80 cents in the dollar for a period of time to lift that across the local government. So that's a little bit about me.
Morning everyone, my name's Kacheneri. I'm from Watercare. Those of you that live in Auckland will be, I'm sure, very familiar with Watercare, given the small matter of the drought this year. We are, of course, your water and wastewater provider to the people of Auckland. My role at Watercare is Chief Digital Officer. That means I have responsibility for all of the traditional information technology, but also the operational technology that runs our plants and networks.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Saba Samiei. I am originally from Iran actually, and now I live in New Zealand. I'm a partner development manager at Microsoft, and what that means, as a lot of people ask me, is that I work with Microsoft partners in New Zealand and help them grow their business. However, I think the reason why I'm here today is my passion for data and AI. I've been an AI ethics researcher for around 4 years, and I continue to upskill. I do need to make a tiny disclaimer. While I work for an amazing company called Microsoft, anything I say today is my opinion and my own research. So if you want to quote anyone, quote me. Don't quote them. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Richard Hobbs. I'm General Manager of Strategy at Transpower. You might think that I look quite different to that person on screen there named Corbus from Transpower. Unfortunately, he is sick today, and so is remaining in Wellington. I'm based here in Auckland, and in my role I'm across strategy and also our customer and new ventures functions. And my interest in digital really is around how we can enable the future electricity system so that we can help to decarbonise our country and achieve net zero carbon.
Beautiful introductions, everyone, but you missed the question. So we're going to come back this way. Okay, now you've got more time to think about it, Myles. So we're going to come back this way, and just a little bit of thought about, in your day-to-day, what's your opinion on where you think the data could be leveraged better already?
Great. So what I didn't mention is what Transpower does. So we own and operate the national electricity transmission grid, and we're also the system operator for the electricity system. So we operate the electricity market that balances the system in real time, 365, 24/7 to keep the lights on. So from our perspective, I think the really interesting area in terms of how we've made headway in digital recently is, we're fundamentally an engineering company, so we get really excited by technology. But what has been really transformational is when we've started to flip that, and rather than think about applying cool tech to our business, is thinking about what are the problems we're trying to solve for customers or for internal employees, and how can we get value from that. And I think that's fundamentally resulted in us having to have a deep understanding of our operating model and what we actually do, to then think about the digital use cases that will deliver the most value in our company. So fundamentally, we are a large asset management company. So we have, we need good asset management systems and structures and data to know the condition of our assets. We then need to have good asset condition information. And so, we're just starting, and we're really one of the first transmission companies in the world now to roll out drones at scale for achieving asset condition information. We then have to make decisions on our assets in models, and that's really about, we make decisions each year for maintenance and replacement of our existing asset base in the order of $500 million a year. So each 1% improvement in optimization around our asset health and criticality decisions is worth $5 million to us. It's a lot of money. And then we have to think about what is the future evolution of the grid as new wind farms, new renewables, and other electrification technologies hook up. And that's really a simulation play to simulate how it might evolve into the future under different scenarios. We then move into our planning and scheduling and our design. And so, we have BIM at the moment we're working on through, virtual 3D representations of our assets to assist our designers to better design for our network without having to visit site all the time and leverage productivity. And then we deliver our work in the field, and that's delivered by our contractors. And really that's around, at the moment, digital applications, and I think, further into the future, QR codes on a lot of our assets, augmented reality goggles to provide work practices, and switching instructions so that we can work more efficiently, effectively, and safely on our assets.
Thank you. Yeah, okay.
So I think coming from a completely foreign, should I say, world to infrastructure, what I have learned in the last 2 days, in the last few months, ever since I was asked to be on the panel, one thing that I have noticed, and I think Thomas also mentioned it as well, is that there is a lot of data in New Zealand, but it's very siloed. So I think where we can leverage our data best is to find an approach to actually bring that all together, connect it, and then make sense of it. So there are existing technologies that you can do this with. The best one that I've come across is a blockchain-based, a distributed model, basically, where you can gather all the data and make it available to everyone so everyone can have a say. One of the really interesting projects that I have come across is a project called Regen Villages, or Eco Villages. They are self-reliant, self-sustainable ecosystems that a Stanford University entrepreneur and professor is now working on. And we can dive into what those are later, but what he has designed for these villages is a software, a blockchain-based software, so everyone in those villages, from the plumber to the electrician, to the residents, to the landowners, to the farmers, everyone can have a say in how things need to be done. And I think if we can replicate that somewhere in New Zealand, it will be
Interesting, yeah. Very good. Thank you.
Really just picking up on a point there, I think for us the opportunity to leverage data better is in bringing some of those silos together, and those silos exist in our organisation, really in the old OT world and the IT world, and I think increasingly what we're seeing is a movement from the systems that support the operation of the plant and network and SCADA systems increasingly becoming more connected through IoT and becoming closer and closer to IT, but we haven't really merged that data to unlock it ultimately for much greater benefit. So there's a real opportunity in our business to do that, but ultimately we anchor that to the why and the who we do that for. And of course we do that for our customers ultimately and for the people of Auckland. So, I guess my view is we're going to hear from a lot of technology people today with technology views, but I think the big evolution in this data space for us across the industry is to move from talking about the necessary inputs, things like data standards, are necessary inputs, to outcomes and outputs, and to develop a collective vision of the why and what does good look like and what will be different here, because without that, at the risk of offending people, data standards are unlikely to inspire anyone, or very few.
They're actually unlikely to occur. What happens is across other sectors that are evolving, digitally transforming at a faster pace, it's not until you've envisaged why you're transforming to actually create the momentum to make suddenly those fundamentals just become a lot faster and get done because they've got a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anything that's derived from a, thou shalt adhere to standards or whatever that thou shalt is, always comes with the burden of, we have to, from an organisational perspective, we have to input standards into some centralised data governance model without really a connection to the why. It doesn't capture the hearts and minds. It doesn't actually serve a bigger purpose. And organisations will only do the bare minimum. And what we're doing really is missing a trick in terms of the opportunity to truly get the value out of that. So I think for us, it's how do we bring all of the great ideas together and actually paint that picture for the future. You talked, Thomas, about the Centre for Digital Centre for Built New Zealand. It's a great idea. How do we actually get this underway? There's a lot of talking, but it's action that creates change. So I think that's the challenge for us now.
The other thing that you find with more of a collective visionary approach is that you move through the digital transformation maturity model faster. And what normally happens is you start with how do we digitalise what we're doing, and then how do we augment the things that we're doing with digital. But it's not until, and it normally takes about between 15 to 30 years, it's not until you get to the how do we completely rethink what we're doing now that we've got a digital infrastructure in place, and that's when it gets really exciting. What would you think we could leverage best?
Yeah, look, a couple of things sort of spring to mind for me. So the first one is I completely agree with what I'm hearing and with what Giles was saying as well earlier. In an increasingly tech-savvy world, there is no hiding on our investment decisions. And in land transport, we're getting that all the time. So we think we know the best about our assets based on our data sets, but we're getting challenged more and more by the public saying, why did you do that road and not our road? And so you start looking at going, well, what's wrong with our data? And Giles has sort of alluded to it. We've collected it 1,000 different ways over 1,000 years. We have really, really big data sets. And the other thing about land transport is we don't actually have a monopoly on all the best data scientists. We don't have a monopoly on all the best thinkers on where the world's going to go. So the opportunity for us in land transport is to open our data and really make it available. So we've got years and years of data sets on traffic counts and road quality and all kinds of stuff like that. And we use it day in and day out for operational things. As Giles says, 90% of our costs are in operations. And so we use it for things like, how well did we do in repairing the footpath? Well, what was our response time? But here's a really interesting thing. When you take that land transport data about footpaths and you put over top of that socioeconomic data, what you'll see, in one example, is that rich people are really good at complaining about their footpaths. Rich people are really good at spotting when they're not happy with their footpaths. So from a land transport perspective, with scarce capital, how do we know we're actually investing across all of New Zealand, all of Aotearoa, in the most appropriate way? And not hearing about the faults in those footpaths, are we actually creating a health burden in some of these neighbourhoods? Are people rolling their ankles? Are they not using the footpath? Are they walking on the road because the road is seen as a better surface for their prams and buggies? So when we start layering information, we're going to have a whole lot more insight that we've never actually had. And the challenge with that is, right now, and you particularly see it in Auckland Transport, we were 7 companies that came together 10 years ago. We're still working as 7 companies in terms of our data standards and data structures. So you ask, how many safety barriers have we got? What length? We don't know. Some are measured this way, some are measured that way, some aren't even recorded. So what we see as a real opportunity is cleaning up our data, standardising our data, opening up our data, and then basically letting the world look at it and say, how can you draw insights from this that we can't possibly see? How can you help us generate more value from this information for the health business, the education business, the police, the water business, from this data set? It's ours at the moment, but how do we make it New Zealand's?
Very good, and just picking up on one of your points there about you don't have a monopoly on the data scientists. No one has a monopoly on them because I was just reviewing an analysis of the digital technology workforce, which is going to be coming out in the start of December, and data scientists and data analysts are the highest in demand role at the moment, with the expected growth over the next 2 years of demand of 65%, more needed versus what's available. From a numbers perspective, that's an extra couple of hundred. It's not huge, but it's still hard to pump them out in a couple of years. So everyone will need to think about how to do some of this stuff collectively because there's limited resources. We do have a couple of questions, and I'm just going to we're going to get off script now, so all the preparation we should have done. We can go phew, we've got it here now. This question I've got here is quite broad in scope. So I'm going to ask the question from the audience participant, but maybe we want to just think of it in the terms of, or I'll tell you the question first. How do we ensure digital and technological equity for all New Zealanders is achieved? Now that's a very big question, very philosophical, but what if we think about it from the perspective of where we've been going with this conversation? What if we think about it from the perspective of data and data equity, ownership of data? So how do we make sure that all New Zealanders, what's their role in this? Do they own the data? Do they have access to it? What if they are digitally excluded? How do they be involved in the future business models that you're thinking about creating that will require digital? What's your thoughts on data ownership, data stewardship, digital equity? Who would like to jump in on that? Curly.
Wow.
Oh, you go, Rebecca.
That's a big question. I think we should go back to the script that we prepared for. I don't have a profound answer for that. I think there is no silver bullet in there. I would say, I have a lot to do with, I have 3 young kids. I have a lot to do with their school. It starts right at the earliest levels around access to devices, digital literacy, and the inequities that we see in our society right from the get-go. Increasingly, education is becoming more and more digitised and more and more dependent on technology. This year has been a great example. Children's learning in some cases will have been heavily impacted by the fact that they weren't able to pick up and take a device home and work remotely. And I think we have to start right from the beginning around, how do we address some of those equity issues? How do we make sure our educational facilities are better funded to provide people, our kids, with the devices that ultimately, they're going to come into a world where they're not going to have any choice. It will just be part of the way they go about living their lives. But I can give you a really good example of an experience I had earlier this week with a slightly different lens, but I think it kind of teases out the same theme. I accompanied one of our field supervisors around our field crews, and it was a bit of a health and safety exercise for me, but really interesting to go and see our field crews out in the field, replacing water meters, doing their jobs in the hot sun, laying down on the ground. And I wanted to see, what are the hazards they were dealing with? How do they go about doing their jobs? And what's the one thing that I could do to make their job better? And I was mortified when the chap I was talking to presented me with a 6-page piece of paper and said, if you could turn my pre-start into something digital, that would revolutionise my world. And I thought, wow, have we missed a trick here? And it really is a bit of an equity thing. So, I sit in Newmarket, we deal with lots of people who make lots of noise about systems, and I want this and I want that, and I need this analytics, and I to some extent we respond to the noisiest, squeakiest wheel. And here is a whole bunch of field crews who every job that they do, before they do the job, they fill out 6 pages of pre-start health and safety documentation that says, where's the nearest medical centre, where's my evacuation point? And I just thought, wow, how do we get out there more often? I took it and said to him, 2 weeks and I'll be back to you with an app. And he said, I bet you can't. I said, I bet I can. I love a challenge.
How you going?
But that's a great example. We're into it. We're going to do it. But it's a great example of, those little things are going to change those people's jobs immediately. They will make a huge difference.
Similar to that, I just heard yesterday that 60% of the budget for the Citizens Advice Bureau in New Zealand is printing government forms, because the government digitalised its forms. Actually, they made them to PDFs, and then people who don't have a printer go to the Citizens Advice Bureau to get it printed out. And so 60% of their budget, it's crazy. So yeah, just thinking about that equity. I know you want to say something, Saba, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I wanted to touch on, and I think your point about digital equity is great in terms of educating people. What I wanted to touch on was the data ownership. And I think as idealistic as that sounds, it is actually everyone that needs to own the data, because regardless of the platform or the sector that we're talking about, every one of us owns a piece of that data. And every one of us is impacted by how that data is used and the decisions that are made based on that data. So this whole idea of, and I know I keep going back to it, this blockchain-based distributed model that everyone can contribute to is not a futuristic idea. It's something that exists today. It's something that we can invest in today. It's something that people can start contributing today. So in terms of the data ownership from an ethical perspective, I think it's everyone. And every individual should have a say in terms of how is their data used, who has access to it, how is it used, whether it's the house that I'm living in, the road I'm going to drive on, the words that I look up in my search engine, or the photos that I put up on my social media. They're all my data, and therefore I need to have a say. And the decisions that are made on those spaces need to be transparent to me, and I need to understand why.
Yeah, I think the best analogy around that is that what we're expecting to see is data is going to evolve like the financial system evolved, that you own your own money, you give certain people rights to see it or use it or transact it or look after it. It's not a physical thing like data, but there's a whole lot of evolution if you think that needs to happen in a relatively short period of time to get, if data was to evolve to a situation like the financial system, regulations, trust, all that kind of stuff. Myles, Richard, around this point about this equity stuff, I think the conversation we had the other day about, you were talking about iwi and engagement, that's probably a useful lead-in.
Definitely, and this kind of touches to Thomas's presentation earlier about digital twins. And I go back to leveraging our digital advantage as being able to prove up the value and demonstrate to consumers and people and stakeholders that there's value there, because it's through that we'll be able to scale these use cases into really meaningful, nationwide digital twins, etc. So the example we have at Transpower is every time we now are building a new and meaningful line, we consult with the local iwi, and what we do is we've worked with LINZ to bring up the old maps. So, for example, the maps from the 1860s, which are sort of hand drawn with pencil or quill and ink, and we essentially we bring it into a digital twin model of the landscape and do a sort of 3D flyover to say, this is where this old sacred power site was, etc. And then we show where our existing lines are and where the new lines will be built, and how that's traversing around sacred sites and how we've thought carefully about that. And for the iwi, because it's so meaningful that they're really important connection with the land. It's not about the transmission lines and towers. They're saying this is amazing. We've seen these old 1860 maps drawn up in pencil, but for you to be able to bring this to life for us, so that we can actually see how that maps onto our current day circumstance, is just so profound and meaningful. And so I think the ways that we can leverage data like that with those use cases could then prove up value to different stakeholders, provide the social license for us to roll it out at scale, and really provide even more value to all of New Zealand.
Thank you. I'm going to cut to a new question, Myles, so if you had one planned, I'm sorry. There's a whole heap coming in here. I apologise in advance. I'm not going to get through them all because it's gone red on the screen down here, so got to pump through a few things. So what we've got here is one about sweating the assets, and you can go for this one. Sweating the assets. As stewards of our assets, does data and digital, along with dynamic pricing, things like that, enable us to unlock far better use of existing assets, or do you think the opportunities are just incremental? Is it a game changer or incremental with data?
Look, absolutely. So one of the things that we're looking at in land transport is how do we actually get the information on our network. So currently we send trucks out with people and they take photos and they eyeball stuff and they put cones out and they wander up and down. That's not the future. The future is collecting this information electronically. So we've seen that around the world, and I know that Waka Kotahi and Auckland Transport, and particularly the Auckland Motorway Alliance, are looking at how we can do that. So there were some really cool pilots done at Waka Kotahi when I was there a couple of years back, where we ran feature extraction and feature recognition between the CBD and the airport, and then we were able to directly link that straight into our asset database. So we could say, oh, that sign's actually in the wrong place. That speed sign isn't even there. Why isn't that speed sign there? But it starts getting smarter because with LiDAR technology, which I see now is in the iPhone 12 Pro, for those of you who have one, I don't have one yet, it actually measures stuff. So you can now drive a road at the speed of traffic, and you can notice that the safety barrier is there. You go back through the next day. That safety barrier has been moved 20 centimetres. Someone's hit it. So now we can actually be positively respond to the fact that an asset is being damaged. So we can now start seeing this. So this capturing of information electronically at the speed of traffic is going to be an absolute game changer, and it's available now. We just need to start embracing it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yes?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think it definitely is a game changer for us. $11 billion worth of water and wastewater assets means, a significant capital program every year in building new assets, but also renewing our existing assets. Also a significant maintenance program, both reactive and, of course, proactive maintenance. And if we can use data correlated from many different sources, potentially enriched from external sources, to get to a point where we can predict propensity for failure across our critical assets, and we can take action on those assets before they fail, one, it's a much better outcome for our customers, which is the most important thing, and you get in the shower at 6 o'clock in the morning and don't find yourself wondering where the water's gone. But of course the cost, far more efficient if we can manage that as proactive maintenance, avoid the failure, not have to do truck rolls and go out and disrupt everyone with critical assets failing. So, we think there's a huge opportunity there to really change the way we run our business off the back of better harnessing the power of our data.
Thank you. I'm just going to actually, I know you're gagging to have a go, but what I want to do is, for the benefit of all the people who want to contribute, rake through a few of these a bit faster and just point at you and you just do one answer, and then rather than everyone answer each one. So I've got one for you, Saba. This question is around how do you think we should integrate digital as a tool into the wider question of achieving the infrastructure outcomes, rather than just an add-on? So what's your observations and insights around it being more of a integrated tool rather than just something we're doing a business, we've just tacked a bit of data, digital on the side?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there's like a silver bullet answer to that. The way I would look at it is that we need to have a more long-term plan around this. Some of the things that we're doing today need to fundamentally change. Some of the things around regulations and policies. The way we make decisions, that needs to completely change, because the digital world is a completely different world to how we've traditionally lived and done stuff. So if you are right now it feels like patchwork, it feels like an add-on, it feels like something that comes in, ad hoc, solves something, and then whether or not it stays or doesn't, no one really cares. But it is an actual transformation, and therefore the term digital transformation, and transformation is a journey.
Would it be fair to say, back to an earlier point you said, that if we start with the vision and the direction of the business and what we're trying to achieve, rather than do we add on some digital twinning or do we put in some sensors, what are we trying to achieve, then it'll end up being more of a long-term inclusive vision, long-term thing, rather than just a tool. Yeah. Okay, good answer. Thank you. Digital twin question for you. There's a long question here, but basically it finishes with who should lead the development of it? Do you want the whole question?
It's probably not a question for me. Rebecca will probably be more of an expert in
Okay.
either Rebecca or Myles in this field. Yeah.
Look, I don't think there's anything we can't overcome with regards to data and what we need to change without good government leadership and partnering with the private sector. I think this truly has to be a collaboration across all of New Zealand. And I think if we take that a step further, ultimately where's the money coming from? So right now we're funded in silos and we work in silos. Land transport's got fuel excise duties, road user charges. What if this digital world, and when we start layering data and blockchains and other things, start saying that money is better spent from a wellbeing perspective in education? So picking up Rebecca's point, how quickly can land transport transfer its funding over to education to get a better outcome for New Zealand? And government will need to help us with that because there's people on our side that won't want to let it go. Roads are very important.
No, that's a good idea. And I think my perspective on the whole digital twin thing is it's not really a one thing. It's more of a concept of digitising your data and making it open and sharing. So it'll need everyone. It'll need strong governance and collaboration, really, won't it? Okay, and got a couple more minutes. So this one's for David. Well, they're going to answer it, but you're going to listen, right? What is the role of central government to create data standards and platforms to enable the sharing and access of information better? What's the role of central government? I'm going to let anyone want to put their hand up on that one. Go for it.
So the role of creating data standards can sit with anybody, right? And there's plenty of data standards flowing around. Land transport, we've got SOS roads, in the UK you've got some. Everybody's got their own standards, right? The challenge with the whole thing is implementing it, right? So Giles put up on the board it's worth $70 million to NZTA in the land transport sector for a data standard. But then he backed it up saying, but from an NZTA perspective, it's a $45 million layout for us to get that. So when you looked at the data standards that were created back in 2017, and they came to market in May 2017, who's actually adopted them? Nobody. So because it's a digital transformation, which we said. So the challenge is, how do you make that transformation happen? It needs money, and ultimately it needs government money or centralised money of some sort to make it happen. You can have the world's best standard, but without implementation you get nothing.
Bit of carrot and stick, maybe?
Well, I think Giles's point, so we had a lot of debate about this inside NZTA when I was there at Wakatahi. The initial business case said it's a $100 million layout and we might get 28. The indicative business case came back and said it's about 45 and you'll get at least 70. But what that it doesn't talk about is what that actually unlocks. So this ability to have cleaner data, layered data with education, with health, with police, and the benefits to the broader society. And this is a real challenge. How much money should Waka Kotahi tip into sorting out their data, knowing that education is going to get the benefit in the near term?
So that's to the question of what's the role of central government. It's helping set the vision, connecting the silos, and then maybe pushing with some regulation or encouragement or investment. Does anyone else want to have a...
Yeah, I just really would want to reiterate the point of, I think the why is really important, anchoring everything to the why. So we should have data standards. Why? What will be better? What is the problem we're solving? What is the outcome we're driving for? Because you can see this going down a path of we should have data standards, that's great, or form a task force or a committee or something that generally nothing good comes out of, the risk of offending people again. But actually, this journey needs to be a different journey. We need to have a collective and shared why. This is an exercise in capturing the hearts and minds. The data standards are an input. The digital twin is an input. What is it an input to? It's the why. And I think this is where absolutely there's a role for central government. But I would challenge the government to think differently about the way that you do this, to create that vision and create that why. And it's compelling and it's inspirational. And then you don't have the carrot and stick conversation because you don't need the stick because everyone sees the value, they see the part they have to play in it. And ultimately, we all as citizens of this country get something out of it. So I think that why is what we're missing at the moment.
Yeah. Saba, you...
Yeah, I think one thing that the central government can do, alongside everything that was already mentioned, is change some of the policies that you have around who can do what. As I understand, government normally, when they want to fund, contractors or companies, they look at the historic data or, other projects that they've done. If a technology is new and it's just being implemented, chances are that data does not exist. So make sure that the policies are flexible enough to allow innovation, as well as, having that collective why, as well as, and be a bit quicker to make decisions.
Thank you. We're running out of time for the panel. I'm just going to work backwards along the line from Richard and just see if there's any closing remarks you'd like to make. And apologise to, there's a lot of questions came through. We'll probably try and see if we can work with the event organisers here and share any sort of answers that come through with you later on. But Richard, any closing comments?
Yes, so I touched earlier on the sort of here and now for leveraging data, but I want to paint a sort of longer-term vision for the electricity sector. You know, we're going to have tens of millions of digitally enabled devices, smart heat pumps, electric vehicles, batteries, solar, interacting with the electricity system in real time, 365, 24/7. And the ability to have a more automated, self-healing grid and the ability to smooth out peaks will mean that we'll be able to avoid billions of dollars of unnecessary investment in the electricity network that could otherwise be avoided through smarts and digital. And I think that's a really important opportunity as we transition to net zero carbon, because it has to be affordable. So for us to be able to leverage that data in the electricity sector to continue to provide a reliable supply and enable all these new technologies is really critical.
Thank you, Richard. Any closing comments, Saba?
No, just thanks for having me. And one thing I did want to touch on, what we didn't get to because of the questions, is a research that has been done on self-reliant, eco-friendly, potentially pandemic-resilient future infrastructure. So if you want to know more about that, let's have a chat.
Thank you.
Just one point, really. I think one thing you'd have to ask yourself is if the technology exists today, and there's generally speaking a will, why are we not doing this, and what are the blockers? And we haven't really talked about skills. We've mentioned data scientists and data analysts, but actually reskilling the people that have worked in our business with built infrastructure that they've managed in a certain way, using their own version of the data in their own spreadsheet, in their own secret filing cabinet for a really long time is going to be a huge part of this journey. So I think that's something we do need to tackle.
It goes back to the vision question story, right? You can bring people through that change if they know why.
I guess for me it's about diversity of thought. We've got a lot of people in the room that obviously work in infrastructure. We need to engage with data scientists and data analysts. Hackathons, a fund for hackathons. Let's have far more hackathons.
Thank you very much. Well, that's it for us. Thank you very much for listening. I'd like you to thank the panellists for giving up their time, and hopefully it was very useful for you. Thank you very much.